administrations come and go, it's useful to remember that the arc of history bends in many different ways. I think a lot of people in this space were very hopeful that it wouldn't bend backwards. But I think everyone knows now, make sure you get it past Congress. Anything that is not a law can be undone. And you see that again and again. I'm going to cut this very short, but I want to make sure that people who don't know who we are and what we're working on have some context for what Sunlight is. So I'm going to fly through this and get to the people who are doing that work and day in, day out, and make sure you know who they are. Because I think what they're working on, what they're seeing, is a reflection of the state of things. So, if you didn't know, our name comes from Justice Louis Brandeis's famous quote, "Sunlight is said to be the best disinfectant, and electric light the best policeman." And that's actually an interesting moment, because of course transparency is now being reflected back upon everyone. We're all filming things, we're all capturing things, we're all able to dip into this ridiculous roaring stream of information every day. And this week is a moment to talk about that. What does it mean? What's happening? We think knowledge made by government should be available to the people of those governments, wherever they were. That's a basic principle of government. And it goes back to the Enlightenment. This is not a new idea. It's just simply there's a new context for it. We believe information is power. Asymmetric information is powerful. That's why we want to see it released to everyone, making sure that everyone is able to see the raw materials of the democracy and build something with them. And as we have moved through this past year, we've tried to engage in national conversations about this, to be thoughtful advocates. We've been responsive when Congress said, hey, there's an issue, there's an online disclosure cliff. We know you've been talking about this for years, what should we do? We said, well, we should write some legislation that holds the platforms accountable and gets them to put up a public file, like TV stations do. It gets them to put disclaimers into those ads so you know who they're from. Hasn't passed yet, but it's out there. It's a vehicle, it's a moment, it's a starting point for the country to talk about how should transparency work online. We're all in these spaces now. Who should know what about when? The Speaker of the House is behind part of this. This is an important thing. His evidence-based policy bill had the Open Government Data Act, which we wrote, some of the people in this room, a couple years ago. Passed the Senate unanimously in 2016, then the Congress. Then this just passed, this evidence-based policy bill, and we'll see what happens over the course of the year. But this would make open government data the default. The idea that if it's made by government of the people, it should be accessible to the people, wherever they are, as long as they're connected. We've tried to advocate, as we've seen, issues around travel to point out, you know, there's a way you could post calendars online, you could post spending online. And the USAspending.gov does that. That's where people are finding some of these stories. We have an agenda. We encourage you to go check out sunlightfoundation.com and check that out. We started tracking data takedowns because we thought that was going to be a thing last year. Turned out it wasn't what we thought it would be. Instead, it's a much more subtle erosion. And we have a team here now that we've actually spun up over the last 6 months, and I want to share their work with you. We're pushing to connect the idea of open data with freedom of information. They can't be different tribes anymore. You can't have proactive disclosure sitting here and FOIA reading room sitting here and people over here on the website. It doesn't work. And it enables government to create different narratives about what's actually happening. And that won't work for informed citizenry. We're working with cities all around the United States, including the District of Columbia, and I'm so excited. We're going to have a conversation with people from the district about what's happening right here in our weird federal city-state. I would like to have some representation for my taxation. That's a different thing. Statehood.dc.gov. And we're trying to think through what the next generation of this should be. Working with partners and allies and colleagues and researchers and academics. This team is doing cutting-edge work. Check them out at Open Cities. A lot of them are here. Please come and find them. Sunlight, I think, at its best, has always been about its people. And I'm so proud and humbled to work with these people. And they're here in this room. I get to be the MC, but they're the real stars of the show. What's the state of open government? We're going to talk about that. Go outside. It's now restricted. Used to be able to get closer. That's a perfect visual metaphor, but there's lots of other ones. I like this one too. Not there anymore. This administration isn't so good on our issues. They're allergic to transparency, they're hostile to the role journalism plays in a democracy, and they're shadowed by conflicts of interest. You know what? We have the former office of Office of, how do we say, Government Ethics. That's still a thing, right? Well, I'll show up to talk about that a bit later. Newsweek put this on their cover, and I thought, wow, well, they put on the cover what we've been saying. It feels hyperbolic to make statements, but it's not. What are we doing? Here's a quick rundown. Yes, we're tracking the president's conflicts of interest. Best, I think, open database in the world. We're putting sunshine on those things. If you want to check out the data, please talk to me. We've got contractors and contributors and journalists reporting on it right now. We've got a new prototype. Want to go check it out, poke around, let us know how it's going, please let me know. We're publishing against this. If you want to write about open government, come to us. We're trying, I think I put this 2 slides, that's no good. Oh, there we go. Did you all put this together earlier today? We're trying to work with Congress to make certain kinds of disclosure better. I think everyone understands that we want to know who's acting as a foreign agent. K Street is freaking out though. Because after Paul Manafort's indictment for not registering, after former National Security Advisor Flynn also coming under pressure for not registering, now everybody else is coming up forward and saying, wait, there might be some consequence for not copping to the fact that you're pushing for a foreign government's interest in American soil. Disclosure is the first step. Transparency, necessary but not sufficient. Trying to make the Freedom of Information Act better, working with government and holding government to account. And finally, we're working with our partners to try to bring back lessons from around the world. And if you haven't heard of the Open Gov Hub, please check them out. It's a collection of dozens of different civil society groups right down the street. It's not an accelerator, it's not an incubator. It's a co-working space for people who are trying to make governments of, by, and for the people work better. Yes, using modern technologies, but also using the best in policy and research. Working with Global Integrity has worked in this space, and